Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. Today we'll be continuing our mod highlight series, where once again we'll be looking at OVN lost factions. Today we're going to highlight another race implemented through this mod. A smaller race, but only in stature. These are the Halflings of the Moot. The Halflings themselves are members of the Empire. They are a relatively small part of the Empire, but important nonetheless. You see, the Halflings themselves make a decent chunk of the Imperial Scouts. They are actually quite proficient at it, and in all honesty, it's rather disappointing that despite the decent amount of years that the Total War Warhammer series has existed, we've still not seen any Halflings, as playable units of course. Thankfully, however, the OVN Lost Factions mods implements this one too. Yeah, we'll probably be covering OVN for quite some time, as it is a gargantuan mod, but let's not waste any more time, and let's just jump right in. You'll begin your campaign in the Land of the Moot, a territory in the southeastern parts of the Empire. You'll be surrounded by Imperial states and the Vampire Coast to your east. Thankfully, the majority of the Imperials themselves are in a good standing with you. However, be warned that Marius Lightdorf, the Elector Count of Averland, is not fond of the Halflings, and you may have some aggression from them. Jumping straight into the Technology tab, as that is probably the smallest feature of this faction, the majority of your technology stays the same, as you can expect from every other Imperial state. A few new technologies have been added. They're not really that wow-worthy, but then again, it's quality of life stuff which will benefit the Halflings, believe me, especially the growth one. And obviously the upkeep reduction for all armies. Also bear in mind in regards to Troll Chowder. Troll Chowder itself gives you quite great benefits. All your armies themselves will benefit from regeneration, but the negatives are that Chaos Corruption will spread through your territories, and the humans themselves will start to like you less. And now we're on the Construction tab, possibly my favourite feature from this mod. As you can see, many things have been dramatically changed. You are indeed playing an Imperial faction, but you're not playing as humans of the Empire. Instead, the grand majority of your buildings have been replaced, and so has your complete roster. You will still have access to the basic human Imperial characters, however, they're really not needed. You have a complete roster which works incredibly well. Bear in mind, however, that the Halflings themselves suffer from low stats. This is not a bug or anything, but rather intentional. You see, the Halflings themselves in Tabletop Warhammer and well represented in lore were never really the strongest characters. Or well, the race in general. The Halflings themselves are very weak physically. Sure, they've got decent archers and so on, but the moment you get caught into close combat with, say for example, Graveguard, you're in for a bad time. The mod itself makes great use of the mechanic implemented from Grom the Paunch. The cooking mechanic itself is a fantastic addition for the Halflings. It works exactly in the same way, so we won't have to dwell too much into it. Naturally, you can imagine why this makes so much sense. The race itself is known to be an army of cooks and thieves. So the idea of them using different ingredients to create custom food, which would then provide buffs for their faction, is absolutely great. At the beginning, you can already make a meat pie, which, yeah, maybe the first bonus, the immune to barren wasteland attrition, isn't too great, but the physical resistance 15% bonus for all your armies is absolutely fantastic, and will help you out early on should you decide to launch an attack on the vampires as soon as you can. Your faction has access to one legendary lord, Glibfoot Volspanker. Yeah, I know, the name is a little bit silly, but then again, Warhammer Fantasy. Now, the character himself is a ranged melee hybrid. At first glance, you might think that his stats are low average, but once again you have to remember that this is a halfling. You're not going to expect absolute power. The minus 30% upkeep reduction for all halfling melee units is absolutely great, especially early on when you might need 2 or 3 armies to deal with the vampires. Bear in mind it only works for his army, but it would still allow you to field an extra force without feeling too much strain. His uniquely added skills have a variety of different uses. It's more focused around buffs more than anything, whether to your settlements or your armies, and yeah, those buffs are needed, especially if you intend to try and paint the map with this faction. There are a few essential skills, and I'm assuming that you've probably already spotted them on screen right now. For example, the comradeship, which will increase unit capacity for a bunch of your heroes. Your faction effects mostly follow around positives: a 25% increase to income from industry, a 20% income increase from trade, 5+ growth, and also a bunch of positive diplomatic relations with other order-based factions. As you can see, Averland doesn't like you too much, but every other race likes you, because I guess they see you harmless as it is. Bear in mind that despite this mod, the mood has not been changed. It is still a low tier settlement that can only get up to level 3 and only has access to 3 building slots. I'm not complaining, I'm just warning the player here, because yeah, you don't have access to defenses early on, so the von Carsteins might decide to make you a pincushion. Plan ahead before you decide to attack anyone, especially since Averland is right next to you and they also don't like you too much themselves. Vlad and Marius will generally be fighting for a few turns, so that buys you some time. However, you will notice that Manfred has full access to the rest of Sylvania, and sometimes, especially on harder difficulties, he will turn his attention towards you. An interesting mechanic implemented here is that when you take over a territory which should rightfully belong to a human imperial, you can gift it back to the Empire. This will award you with leadership for all armies as a bonus, diplomatic relations for the Empire as a whole, once again faction-wide, and a high chance to receive reinforcements in the form of Imperial State troops. Think of this in a very similar way to how Marcus Wolfhart and his mechanics work when in regards to state troopers. However, don't expect them coming in bulk. As you gift back settlements, you might receive a unit or 2, nothing too drastic. On screen right now is precisely what I mean, and bear in mind if you want some heavy firepower like for example handgunners or cannons, this is the only way to acquire them. Now let's start checking out some of the custom characters implemented for this mod. First we have the Sheriff, your basic Empire captain, just in halfling form. This has the same battlefield role as expected, but just a little bit weaker. Next we have the Master Chef, another hero which serves to buff up your units with some small buffs and the occasional heal. And lastly we'll look towards the Grand Enchanter. This Lord character will serve as your spellcasting base Lord. While you do have access to other lords of magic in the form of heroes, it's nice to have a spellcaster Lord to lead your armies. Now, there are also other characters implemented for this mod, which act as a halfling variant as the Empire General and the Imperial Huntsman. I didn't see too much of a point of showing them off in all honesty, as well the characters are mostly focused around being the halfling variant of their human counterparts. Instead, what I wanted to do is jump in directly and show off the army itself. We'll be showing off every unique unit added in through this mod, so if you need to, just pause as and when needed when you want to check out stats at greater detail. The army itself is incredibly large. You not only have access to different units, but also mount variations and so on. And visually, barring the ogres themselves, look great. This is something I mentioned during the Araby thing, but bear in mind that ogres haven't been officially implemented, so it's a bit difficult to get them looking as they should. That being said, given the limitations that a modder has, especially when creating custom assets and so on, it looks fantastic. You can obviously tell a lot of detail has been put towards this race. Now, to those of you who aren't tabletop players, you might think that the race looks rather silly. However, I will have you know that this race itself, and particularly the army itself presented here, is incredibly lore-friendly, taking inspiration from an actual army list. There are a few notes of inspiration here and there, of course, but this is why I wanted to show off this faction straight after Araby. It is by far one of my favorite factions implemented throughout this mod, Araby being the first, and then the Halflings being a very close second. Now, mechanic-wise, everything as far as I've seen works as intended, and I barely had any bugs whilst playing this faction during my free time. I just had a bit of visual clipping every now and then, but even then it was so rare it was hardly noticeable. A word of advice for anyone wanting to try out this faction as a full playthrough, you need to bear in mind that this is a weak faction. It's been known that they have their own fighting force. Yes, it's not the most impressive, but it's still there. Their armies focus around skirmishes more than anything, and the use of animals, dryads, and even some baby dragons, it's all part of the lore, and it's a shame that we've never seen this implemented in an official way by Creative Assembly. We're actually missing a lot of stuff for the Empire. And yes, the Halflings would be relatively low on the list, let's be very honest about that, with it being very likely that we'll never see Halflings being introduced as playable units or characters. It's just something that is so minor that, yeah, it could probably fall within the cracks. Which is why I think so highly of the OVN Lost Factions mod, especially for small minor factions like this. If you want a real, fun, but also engaging challenge, I'd highly recommend the Halflings. So, with that being said, you can find a direct link to this mod in the description below. Bear in mind that also you will require a bunch of separate other mods, all of which are directly linked on the mod page itself, so don't worry about that. And to avoid any confusion, as I did have a few messages regarding it, please also bear in mind that you will require a faction unlocker. An unlocker mod is also recommended on this mod's page. And as always, if you know of any mods that you'd like to see featured on this channel, you can always suggest one in the comments below. Or may I suggest joining the official Great Book of Grudges Discord, which can also be found in the description below, where it's much easier to get in contact with me. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.